Welcome to the Believe Fantasy Football Show. Lindsay Rhodes and Michael Fabiano here with you to discuss how the NFL draft affects your fantasy team for next year. I'm so excited that the draft is in the review mirror. As much as I love the NFL draft and all the build up to it, Fabs, it's really fun now that we know where everybody went and we can start making sense of what it means for our world and our fantasy teams. What were your general thoughts about the draft in general? Did you like it?
Well, you know me, the Cowboys were my focus, and we did not draft a running back, and then we signed Zeke, and I don't think it was an awful draft for the Cowboys. I think it was actually good because we did bolster the offensive line, which we really needed, but that backfield is gone from potentially a place where we could find a fantasy sleeper or breakout to now a committee that could be a mess. And so that was a bit of a disappointment. And I mean, just like everybody else, I'm like, what the hell is Atlanta doing with Michael Penix? Like, why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. None. Like, they could talk about it all day long. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And so that was a bit of a surprise, and maybe a little bit more than a bit of a surprise. But ultimately, this draft was not really fantasy friendly. The running back position, there's no clear path to workload for anybody. Now, Jonathan Brooks,
I disagree.
We expect that he'll be the guy in Carolina, but like, is it going to be a three-headed committee? Will he be the lead? Will he be the lead guy with maybe a 50% touch share out of the backfield? Will it be a little bit less? Will it be a little bit more? Will Miles Sanders be on the team? Because we know he's garbage. Chuba Hubbard is a pretty good back. Will Brooks be ready in time for week 1? He had a late season ACL tear. So I have questions about him, although I do like the long-term outlook for him in Carolina. No other running back really landed in a great spot. And some of the wide receivers, Lindsay, didn't land in great spots either. In terms of like guys who like Marvin Harrison, boom. Malik Nabers, boom. I don't know about the quarterback. Odunze, not in redrafts. And then even Brock Bowers, I'm like, Raiders, really? Like, they just went by the board. He was the best player available.
Yeah.
And they're hoping that he's the next Todd Christensen. If you're young, go back and look. Great tight end for the Oakland Raiders back in the day. But even is he going to be the second, third, fourth most targeted player in that offense? I mean, Devontae Adams is there. Jacoby Myers is there. So at best, he's third. So, and you know, Michael Mayer is a guy they drafted last year, who is a pretty highly touted tight end. Are they going to run a lot? So I just don't think we got a lot of immediate impact players from a fantasy perspective among the rookies outside of situations where injuries occur, players get cut here between now and the start of the regular season.
Yeah, there were certainly some situations that I think are better and are going to move people up the board in fantasy. Both, and that's what we're going to spend the majority of this show doing, kind of going through the different guys, their landing spots, our general takeaway for what that means for what we're going to do with them in fantasy. First, a quick reminder, BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite team. So get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so first of all, do you want to start with quarterbacks or wide receivers? Let's start here. Here. Number one pick in Dynasty. Do you go with a wide receiver or a quarterback? Are you going Caleb?
Are we talking about just rookies?
I mean, obviously. We're not taking either of these guys one overall in Dynasty. But yeah, in your rookie Dynasty draft, are you going Caleb or are you going Marvin?
No, I'm going Marvin. I'm assuming non-super flex. It's Marvin all day long. Great landing spot. Super talented guy. He'll be the number one option in Arizona's offense in the passing game. We've seen rookie wide receivers, especially in the last decade plus, really come in and make a bigger impact than we had before. I mean, heck, like you can go back and, Calvin Johnson had an okay rookie year. I mean, like guys are just like coming in and assaulting the stat sheets, and we love that. So Harrison's one in a traditional, and if you're in a super flex, maybe it's Caleb,
right?
But for me, it's Marvin Harrison, and it's not close. It's not close.
Well, I think it's close just because I think Caleb is probably going to have a lot of fantasy value immediately and then also long-term. But I'm a big fan of Caleb. I think he's going to be very good in the NFL. And I think he goes to one of the best situations we've seen on paper for a rookie quarterback entering the league that's a high-end quarterback like this in an awfully long time. And CJ Stroud obviously went to a situation that we then later learned was a very good situation for him, and he had a ton of fantasy value to us. I think Caleb is going to be similar. And I think that the Rome conversation's interesting. You already brought it up. In a real football sense, you love Rome Odunze to the Bears. You love the fact that they're drafting a rookie quarterback and they're pairing him with like a battery mate, So it's Caleb and Rome's the entire way, and they can build around that. And they only have Keenan for a year. Will he stay healthy? This gives them depth. I see a chance though, and I think I'm really high on Rome. I really like Rome, and the way I see that room, he could end up being wide receiver 3 in fantasy in that room. But I also think that there's a strong chance that he's wide receiver 1 in fantasy in that room. I think there is absolutely a chance for that.
You think Odunze could, let's say if all 3 guys stay healthy,
yep,
you think Odunze could be the best fantasy receiver?
No, in that room. I'm talking about the Bears.
No, that's what I'm talking about for the Bears.
Absolutely.
Yeah, obviously not overall. Yeah. So
yes,
so
I think he's a strong
if Keenan Allen and DJ Moore play 17 games apiece.
Yep.
Odunze could still be better than them in fantasy.
Yes, I think he can.
You, my friend, are very bold.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just, so, and then the thing is, for me, also, I'm looking at like where he's going to land in terms of drafts, because people are afraid that he's going to be the wide receiver 3 there. It's going to knock him down the draft. Then if he had gone to a room where it was just wide open and he's the number 1 target, and that's clear, right? Like Marvin Harrison goes to a situation where we know Marvin Harrison is going to be the target leader, probably in Arizona.
You would think.
That's not the case for Rome. So it's going to knock him down fantasy drafts and rankings. And I think that where he will likely fall, I'm going to probably feel pretty comfortable rolling the dice on him there.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a few names out here. You're going to tell me if you'd rather have them or Rome Odunze, because I'm very intrigued by your bold statement. I don't agree with it, but that doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. Jackson Smith and Jigba or Rome Odunze?
I would rather have Rome.
Okay, and we're talking about like wide receiver 3-4 right now. Yeah. So I'll go up the board.
Yeah.
Hollywood Brown.
I think I'd rather have Hollywood because I don't necessarily trust the rest of, the Chiefs receivers as much. There's more question marks there.
Mike Williams.
Let's see. Jets.
Number 2 for the Jets.
And then they brought in Malachi.
Which, by the way, every time I hear that, I think of Children of the Corn, but that's another thing.
Well, that's a thing.
Have you ever seen Children of the Corn?
No, I don't believe I have.
Okay.
I'm not big into, creepy movies that are going to...
We could do this podcast for like 2 hours today because I went to Key West over the weekend and it's one of the most haunted cities in the country and I had a blast. But anyways, I don't want to bore you with that. All right. So are you going Williams or Odunze?
In a redraft. Mm-hmm. That one's tough. Yeah. That one's tough.
But I mean...
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mike Williams, is he a wide receiver 3 in fantasy? I don't know. Is he? I mean, borderline, maybe?
I mean, the thing with Mike is that Mike is so good, and he will have games where he pops, even on the same field as Garrett Wilson, right? Mm-hmm. But will he miss half this season because of injuries? Like, I don't, there's also that you have to factor in. So that one's close for me. But I just think Rome Odunze has the profile of a strong number 1 X receiver.
I think
in this case, well, 100%. There's more competition for targets for him in year 1. Absolutely. But I just think he's so good that he could be the one that, if you're knocking him down the board, and honestly, one of the things we need to talk about is you're also knocking down Keenan and you're knocking down DJ now because Rome Odunze went there. He's going to pull targets. He's going to be on the field. He's going to be a part of this offense, which means that now you're splitting the ball 3 ways instead of 2. And so that's going to hurt all of them. But I do think that Rome has a profile to be a strong number 1. And I kind of think he has that profile more than DJ Moore. Now, DJ Moore has more experience, and so that gives him a little bit of a boost, but I could see a scenario where taking Keenan out of the mix, and that's hard to do because he's so good, but he's clearly a guy that you're going to put more in the slot these days. That could actually be beneficial for him in terms of targets with a rookie quarterback. Although I don't know that Caleb is like your traditional rookie quarterback where he's going to come in and be like, I don't know,
so
I'm feeling a little overwhelmed.
Who is your wide receiver 2 in rookie rankings at that position? We're just talking about it'll be Harrison. And then is it Nabers and then Odunze, or is it Odunze then Nabers?
I don't know. So I haven't done rankings yet. Okay. So
I'm working on mine too. And we can talk about that later in the week. But like right now, if you have the choice of taking one or the other, like where are you going?
I'm taking Odunze over Nabers.
Okay.
If you made me draft right now based on my gut without having like fully like, I just think that Nabers goes into a good situation in terms of opportunity, but not a good situation, right? Like, I mean, are you excited about this offense? Are you like, that's an offense? Holy hell, they're going to score so many points. Ooh, Daniel Jones to Malik Nabers. Give me some of that. I don't necessarily feel that.
No, I
love the draft pick. So smart for the Giants.
Target.
Like, this is the pick. This is what they should have done. They nailed this pick. I just don't love it for fantasy.
Targets, man. I mean, that's what we want. We want targets. So, that's huge, and he's going to get all of them, especially if Waller retires. And they drafted Theo Johnson too. So I don't know. Maybe they kind of think that he's going to retire. I'm not really sure, but I definitely am excited about the opportunities that he's going to get. I mean, listen, Daniel Jones was trash last year. He's not a great quarterback and whatever, but I mean, we're talking dynasty here. He ain't going to be there long-term. And maybe, he could be better than he was last year. He can't be much worse. He didn't play a lot of the year. So, but targets, like you can have I'm going to pull a Lindsay Rhodes. You can have the shittiest quarterback.
You said a bad word
in it, like on the planet. And if the wide receiver that he's throwing to is getting enough targets, he's going to be productive. If Nabers is getting 8 to 10 targets a game, like that's, I don't care who's throwing him the ball. Like, obviously, the ceiling would be affected if it was a better quarterback, but still you're going to get opportunities. So if you're going to go out there and get, 5 for 83 at minimum on a regular basis, I mean, you're going to be a pretty good wide receiver in fantasy.
McLaurin would like a word with you about this whole take, right?
Yeah, but McLaurin is still a 1,000-yard receiver, though, Linz.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but like, in terms of like, we don't think of him as in the way that like you would ideally want to think about Malik Nabers. You want to think about these 3 guys. You want them to be in the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase conversation. Like, that's what we're talking about with this draft class of receivers at the top. Those 3 should be, or else we will feel like it's been a failed experiment. They should be in that conversation in a year or 2, right? So I think that the fact that he goes to the Giants, it affects Malik Nabers' ability to be in that conversation negatively. It doesn't mean he won't be in that conversation. It just means that it complicates things, right, for him to get there.
Right, exactly. But again, opportunity is king in fantasy football.
Yep.
And there's no greater example of opportunity is king in fantasy football in redrafts than talking about Odunze, who you love. I'd rather have at least I would say I'd rather have Harrison. I'd rather have Nabers.
Okay.
I'd probably rather have Lad McConkey than Odunze. I'm like just pulling names off the top of my head. I'd probably rather have Keon Coleman than Odunze in redrafts. So
no, can I hop in there?
Why?
I don't like
number 1 guy catching balls from Josh Allen.
I know. I don't like the pick. I don't like the one that they chose. And I could end up being wrong about this, but the Bills, they feel like a team that could not metabolize the risk that is associated with drafting Keon Coleman. And they clearly see him differently. And so we'll find out which one's right. But to me, he feels like one of the riskiest first round wide receivers because I think that the variance with him is massive. I think that this guy, it's entirely possible in my estimation that he steps into the league and starts playing against NFL cornerbacks and he's not good in the NFL. Like and they're different receivers, but like Quentin Johnston, how you're like, oh yeah, we have high, and then it just didn't, like, he never looked good. I think that is 100% in the cards potentially. That's in the range of outcomes for Keon Coleman because he's a guy who doesn't create separation. Like, we just don't see that separation. I just don't know how that translates to the NFL. So he can win the contested catches. And those are all of those flashy plays that you see on tape. You're like, oh my God, he just sunned that guy. Okay, but is he going to name that great cornerback in the NFL? Is he going to do that? If he can't create separation, and now all of a sudden we've got 50-50 balls right and left, and you're making Josh Allen throw into traffic? Like, are you freaking kidding me? This poor guy who we're like, he throws so many interceptions. Like,
who's going to be the leading fantasy point producer in Buffalo's wide receiver room?
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
I'm asking you.
I just don't like the pick.
I'm asking you.
I don't like it. I just don't like the room. I don't like the room. I don't want any of them. I mean, that's not true. I take that back. Actually, very much like Curtis Samuel at the value where you're going to get him, right? Like, now that he's in Buffalo and he's got Josh Allen, I like that for him, but I'm not excited. Like, I'm not like, oh, I got to draft Curtis Samuel. It's just where he's going to be in your fantasy drafts. I think that he's intriguing, but like Keon Coleman, I would have very much liked him to go to an offense where he was the number 2. So if there were still a move to make, although it's looking less and less likely that like Brandon Ayuk is going to go anywhere now that the draft is passed, T. Higgins, but like, this is a situation where, like, if the Bills could somehow bring in a guy like that between now and training camp, and they've got themselves a 1, and Keon Coleman is now more of like, okay, now you can be specific and come along at your own pace because you've got a guy on the other side that's drawing defenders. Now Keon Coleman is going to get the defensive attention. I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't think I want Keon Coleman, but I understand what you're saying. The opportunity is going to be there.
Keon Coleman,
the targets are going to be there. But I just think he might be a disaster. He might be good.
In fantasy, is he a 4? Wide receiver 4? I think he's probably a wide receiver 4 with some upside.
You think that people are...
For sure.
You think people are going to wait on him, the Bills' number 1 wide receiver, assuming he's still out by the time that we draft? They're going to go, yeah, we're just going to wait, be patient, and that he's going to last to that wide receiver 4 range?
In this day and age, especially in high stakes, I don't know that he will. But if you're talking about like home leagues where there's 10 teams, I could see him being like a high 4. And again, I haven't finished rankings yet, but I can't see him being like for example, I'd rather have him over Odunze, and I don't think Odunze is a 3 in fantasy. I just don't. I mean, somebody'd have to get hurt. Like, he's got 2 really good established veteran guys, and one who you could argue is, a couple of good years away from, maybe being a Hall of Famer. Like, I don't know that he's going to get those targets. So that's why I'd rather take a shot on a guy like Coleman, and certainly a lad McConkey, who ended up in a really good spot. Like, you could argue that McConkey will lead the Chargers in targets next season. You could
100%
absolutely.
I wouldn't even argue that. I would say that.
Yeah.
I would say that.
So like, he's like 3, like he's more of a 3 for me. Right. Like, I do.
Yeah.
So from a fantasy perspective,
he's the perfect example, Fabs, of somebody who went to an ideal landing spot, right? Yeah. Like, his fantasy value and maybe even just real world opportunity is maximized by the landing spot that he goes to. Because and also, don't paint yourself a picture of him as a slot receiver. Like, he plays in the slot, but he played primarily outside. Like, he's a flanker slot guy, with more flanker in his college profile than slot. So don't just be like, oh, white guy receiver. No, I know people are doing that. I know they are.
It's like the Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, like, oh, he's white, he must be a slot receiver.
I know. I want people to do that with Pierce Salty. Anyway, no. So yeah, but I very much like Ladd. And I also like in this offense for Justin Herbert, because I don't really love the rest of the wide receiver room. Like, he is a dependable wide receiver.
Justin Herbert, dude, I'll tell you right now, I don't even know if he's going to be in my top 15 quarterbacks. He's going to be outside. I think he's going to be outside. I'd rather have Jaden Daniels. I'll take a chance. I love mobile quarterbacks. Love them. You know me. I'm listen, on my tombstone, it'll say, here lies Michael Fabiano. He loved to draft mobile quarterbacks. Like, I think he could be an RG3 type in year 1. I really do.
Yeah.
RG3 rushed for like 800 yards and he was great in fantasy. I think he could be that kind of player. I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden Daniels was a top 12 quarterback this upcoming season based on the rushing ability alone. So like Justin Herbert, I mean, I don't even know if he's going to be in my top 15. He'll be close. He'll be in the top 20, but he's going to be like 16 to 20, somewhere in that range.
And the thing about, and I think I'm with you on the Justin Herbert thing. I don't think there's any, like, it's a deep quarterback draft in fantasy. We've talked about this all off season. Like, this is the year you want to wait on that quarterback, right? And so if you're taking that approach, what is the thing that makes you feel like, okay, if we're looking at a Jaden Daniels and a Justin Herbert, like, what's the thing that pushes Justin Herbert over the top? Like, he's really good, but he doesn't have an offense that looks like it wants to throw the ball that much. He doesn't have a great wide receiver room. Like, there's so many knocks against him that I think you're totally right. I think Justin Herbert is a guy that people take late in the draft now, and he's just a guy that feels, like a quarterback and not one of the quarterbacks. I absolutely believe that. Now, what you said about Jaden Daniels maybe being like a top 12 quarterback this year, what are you thinking with regards to Caleb?
I have Daniels ranked in my initial rankings, and again, I haven't finished them yet. I have Caleb probably in the 18 to 20-ish range, somewhere in that ballpark.
Wrong. Okay.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
With all of those weapons?
Okay, so you like him more than Justin Herbert?
As a quarterback or in fantasy?
In fantasy.
In fantasy, walking away, easy peasy, yes.
Okay,
yes.
You like him better than Tua?
Yeah. I will bet on the upside because I kind of know where Tua's ceiling is, right? Like, I know who Tua is. Caleb has an unknown ceiling that I think could be QB1 in fantasy. I think Caleb's very good.
What about Goff?
Goff feels more like, Goff is in that Goff Cousins range-ish, where you're just
right. But is Caleb ahead of those guys for you? He's not for me.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. See, but you said it. Quarterback is deep, and so for me, I have Jaden Daniels ranked higher because I like the mobility and the upside that he brings because of that mobility. And I'm a little bit worried about his slight frame and injuries, but I think in year one, he's got more upside because of the mobility. Now I know Caleb is not a statue in the pocket, but he's not going to rush for 700 yards. And if you put a guy in there that's going to rush for 700 yards, who's got that kind of capability, and I think Jaden Daniels does, that to me makes him the number one quarterback in fantasy football in redrafts for 2024. Now, Caleb will be going ahead of him in dynasty, I think, in more often than not in drafts. Maybe I could be wrong. Some people could be like me and love Daniels. So maybe Caleb and likely goes ahead of him in dynasty. But in redrafts, I think Daniels is the better player from a fantasy standpoint because of that mobility. It's all about those points. You get a point for every 10 rushing yards. You give me 700 rushing yards. You give me 600 rushing yards. I start off there with 60 points. Boom, right there. Give me another 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. That's another, 24 to 30 points. Boom, right there. And then what he gives me in the passing game is just going to bolster his value. So, and I think he's got to play the Cowboys twice a year. The Cowboys offense is really good. Going to have to play the Eagles twice a year. The Eagles offense is really good. I don't know exactly the rest of the opponents there for the Commanders, but the Giants, they stink, but they should be better. I just think he's in a good spot to put up some pretty good numbers there in year one. And so that's why I have him as my number one rookie quarterback in redrafts.
Yeah, I get the argument. 100%. And he could be, I think that I would still take Caleb ahead of him because of the set of circumstances that he's in. And I think the talent is better. But they are different. Like you said, the thing about Caleb is that he still has that, and this isn't going to translate to rushing yards per se. And as you mentioned, those are really, really valuable in fantasy.
Very.
He is as athletic and able to escape pressure and take care of himself and flush out of the pocket. The thing that's different there is he's not tucking it in that situation. He's still looking downfield with his eyes up the entire time that he's rolling out of the, would-be sack and looking downfield. And I think that the way he is as a quarterback, that's going to lead to more completions and more passing yards because he's not going to give up on the play. And he's going to have 3 wide receivers on the field at all times that are going to find ways to get open for him. And so I just think it's such a good situation for him.
Do you think that Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams passing yards at the end of the season will be comparable?
Probably not.
So you think Caleb's going to be significantly better than Jaden throwing the football?
Probably.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think Caleb will have more yards, more talent around him, certainly. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, is Caleb going to be a 4,000-yard quarterback in year one? I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Is he 3,800, somewhere around there? I think that would be a pretty good number to reach. Jaden Daniels, could he throw for 35, 36? I think, yeah, he can. I think he is. I think Caleb will be more, but I don't think it'll be like a huge discrepancy in terms of the passing yards. But I do think, and listen, Caleb can, I wouldn't be surprised if Caleb Williams rushed for 250, 300 yards as well. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But Jaden Daniels has got 500, 600, 700 rushing yard potential in year one.
Yep. Yeah, you're right about that. So these are obviously 1 and 2. And I think that that's a fun conversation about who's 1, who's 2, maybe. Mm-hmm. Here's a more interesting conversation in redraft, not dynasty, redraft. Who's QB3?
So,
because I've got my answer.
I have told you.
Yep.
I don't love JJ McCarthy.
Yep. But he's number 3.
I can make an argument, but I won't, that Bo Nix is in the mix for number 3. But I won't make that argument. Bo Nix landed in a great spot. Yeah. In a great spot. Did he get drafted way too high? Yes. But he ended up in a great spot. He's got little competition for the quarterback 1 spot, and he's got Sean Payton. Mm-hmm. And Sean Payton apparently loves this kid. Okay. I mean, I don't want to start comparing the guy to Drew Brees. That's not fair. Yep. But he landed in a great spot. Maybe not for year 1, but long term. He definitely did. McCarthy, I can see a scenario where Sam Darnold's the starter in week 1, maybe through the first month of the season. If the Vikings are rolling, Darnold keeps the job. If they're not, they bring in McCarthy. I need to see JJ McCarthy succeed in an NFL offense. Think about this, Lindsay. He is going from Michigan, which leaned on Blake Corum in the run. He was not a guy who had a big statistical ceiling on a weekly basis for the Wolverines because he wasn't asked to. Yeah. Now he's going into an offense. They're going to throw the shit out of the ball. I'm Lindsay Rhodes. You're a player. You're a player. Is having such a bad effect on me.
I'm so excited.
On a national radio show. And
I'm going to be like Pat
McAfee.
No, you're not.
And then I'm going to be like, damn you, Lindsay Rhodes.
You're a professional. You're a professional. You're going to like code switch.
I'm just having fun with it. Anyways, I just don't believe him. Did McCarthy end up in a good spot? Freaking hell yeah, he did.
So good.
He landed in a really good spot.
I know.
But I don't know, he's going to throw the ball so much more in Minnesota than he ever did in Michigan. And is that going to be good statistically, or is that going to open him up to more turnovers and more bad passes and inaccuracy and lack of confidence? I don't know.
But we didn't really see that.
But I mean, he just didn't throw the ball a ton in Michigan. That's
100%. But I'm just saying, you would think that even with a smaller sample size, there would still be a percentage of we asked him to do that and he couldn't do that. That turned into bad stuff. And we didn't see that. We saw him check boxes of the things that he was asked to do. And I kind of think that the Vikings offense is the most perfect example of an offense that's probably going to do roughly the same thing. He's going to a coach that I trust to handle it offensively, and Kevin O'Connell. I mean, the weapons that he is going to have to work with in year 1, JJ, Addison, Aaron Jones, Hawkinson, when he's back. I mean, that's a rookie quarterback's dream. So if he is the guy that, if you're throwing to JJ's pretty good. He's going to be somebody that you can depend on to do all of the things that you want him to do as a rookie quarterback, right? He's going to protect you to some degree. I very much like this situation. I think he's my QB3 in redraft. Not necessarily for dynasty, though I haven't really done that list yet. But this is a very specific immediate. The only thing that I do think is, and you already mentioned it, is how soon does he get on the field? Is it Sam Darnold for the first couple of weeks? Or is it not? And it's possible it's not. It's possible that it's JJ and Sam is his backup right out of the gate. And I think at some point the plan will be to put JJ on the field immediately.
McCarthy in his final year at Michigan averaged 22 pass attempts per game. 22. That's minimal.
Yeah. What was his interception? What was his turnover rate? What was his? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I get it. I mean, it's college against the pros. He only had 4 interceptions in his final year. He only had 9 interceptions over his last 29 games in college, which is great. Which is great. I mean, you could say that about Trey Lance too when he was at North Dakota State. Obviously, the competition is different. I think the year before COVID,
we knew Trey was a big, I don't know.
Okay, I know. I get it. I'm just throwing it out there. But the bottom line here is that say that he ends up starting in week 1, right? Say he ends up starting in week 1. You're looking at probably what? 550, 600 pass attempts. I mean, it's going to be a lot. So the opportunities are going to be there. He's got JJ and Addison and Hockenson when he comes back from the knee. No question about that. That's all good. But bottom line here is that
you don't know. You haven't seen it.
I got to see more. Yeah. I got to see more. I think I'm not going to poo-poo him and say he's going to suck altogether. And also the trend, the pattern, whatever you want to call it, Linz.
Yeah.
Of first round quarterbacks, including those picked in the top 10.
Yeah.
And we had 6 go in the first round, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Am I 6? Was it 6?
Oh, I mean, no, we had 6 go in the first 12.
half of those guys, if you look at the trend, are going to be mediocre or worse. That's the trend.
Yeah. The thing that's different here, though, is there is no trend of 6 quarterbacks going in the first 12, right? Like, so now you're going, okay, the trend of quarterbacks that go in the first round, this is what the numbers bear out. Like, these are quarterbacks that the NFL valued enough to take in the top 12 picks.
Yeah, but the NFL,
whereas a couple of years ago, we didn't even crack that. Like, we got Kenny Pickett out of the way, and then we were like, wait till the 3rd. They're bad. So same NFL that did that was like, jump on these guys.
Historically,
yeah,
quarterback is maybe the most difficult position to predict.
Yes,
from college to the pros. The greatest player at the position of all time was a 6th round pick. Okay, the 49ers have gotten to the playoffs twice, getting to the NFC Championship game and then the Super Bowl with a 7th round pick.
Yeah,
while Jamarcus Russell sucked, Achilles Smith sucked. Almost everybody in the 2021 first round picks, the quarterback, have sucked. And Lawrence has not been nearly as good as people thought he was going to be.
Right.
NFL teams will take chances on quarterbacks more than any other position. And more than 50% of the time, they freak it up.
They freak it up. You can't do that after you've already dropped 2 S-bombs.
No. And so,
but like, frick doesn't even make sense there.
And so, whatever. You get it.
Okay.
We want to sit back and be positive here and say Nix is in a great spot. Well, number one, Penix isn't going to do anything for 2 years, at least, because I don't understand that. But these guys, somebody's going to bust, and it's probably going to be 2 or 3 somebodies in the first round. And we're going to go back and look and like, damn, what were they thinking about drafting that guy at 8 or drafting that guy at 12 or whatever it was? Because the NFL will just, would you stop with that hat?
It's crooked. My hat is crooked. Like the brim is crooked. And I'm looking at myself in reverse, so I can't even.
Crooked. All the way crooked.
Sorry, audio listeners that don't know what we're talking about. Fabs, let me ask you a question.
But guys are going to bust. It just happens.
Yes. What do you do with Penix in Dynasty?
He's
like a rookie dynasty draft. Where do you pull that trigger? Because you know that he's in their plans. He's their Jordan Love. Like they're taking this approach. We can argue about whether or not that's smart, but like we've got 2 years of Kirk, and then we've got 2 years of Kirk Cousins, and then it's Penix time. What do you do with that?
He ain't a first round pick.
I'm not, because do you want to hold him? Like, you're literally going to put this guy on your bench.
You are going to hold him.
Oh, for 2 years, you're going to need that spot. Like, I get it, but like, isn't there going to be a quarterback that comes out next year or the year after that you could fill that spot with that? Like, I don't know that I want to hold him.
again, a stupid decision by the team. I don't get it. Every other quarterback with a chance to start year one is going to go ahead of him, and it's no brainer. I mean, I'm not making any kind of bold prediction. Drake May goes ahead of him. Bo Nix goes ahead of him. They all do. They all go ahead of him. I think Michael Penix is probably a 3rd round pick in a rookie only dynasty draft at best, maybe a 4th at best. Just like you said, I got to sit the guy for 2 years. Think about this. There's a chance that he could be 26 before he becomes the starter on that team. So that's I'm not saying it's old, but like hell.
Well, I mean, and not for nothing, Fabs, but like quarterbacks deep. We've talked about this. You're not desperate for quarterbacks. You can get quarterbacks. Yep. Like, do you think Michael Penix is going to, when he eventually does start, is he QB1? Like, do you desperately need to chase that so much that on your dynasty team, you're just going to stash him on your bench for 2 years and not have maneuverability with the wire when your running back gets hurt and you need to chase to go pick up that backup guy that wasn't on anyone's roster that's all of a sudden starting? Like, I think he's a guy that you're probably going to draft in dynasty and then drop before he ever sees the field just because you have to. Like, it's a real specific dynasty roster that's just going to hold on to a quarterback that is Michael Penix for 2 years.
Maybe the most popular pick for Penix, say that 5 times fast, is the dynasty owner that has Kirk Cousins. Backup insurance, giddy up.
That's it. You're right.
So, but I mean, all 5 of the other quarterbacks that got drafted probably going to have a chance to start week 1 or definitely starting week 1. Caleb's going to start week 1. Jaden's going to start week 1. Drake May, I mean, maybe, they got Brissett there. Maybe they bring him along a little bit slowly. McCarthy, maybe they start Darnold. Nix to me is starting week 1. I mean, Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. Come on. But maybe Peyton wants to bring him along. I don't know. You got to see what happens, right? Remember when Russell Wilson got drafted by the Seahawks and they had just signed Matt Flynn and they're like, well, wait a minute. Matt Flynn is going to be our starter. They draft Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, as you like to say, suns him in training camp. And then Matt Flynn doesn't see the light of day in Seattle and Russell Wilson takes the job. So a lot of this is going to have to, will depend on, well, what does Bo Nix look like in OTAs? What does he look like in training camp? How confident is Peyton that he's going to put him under center in week 1 and he's not going to crumble? There's still a lot that we have to learn about that. Same thing with McCarthy. If McCarthy doesn't look great, they'll put in Darnold and play him. It's Drake May, same kind of thing. They'll play Brissett. So some of these guys may not get the opportunity, but we know one thing, that this kid Penix is not getting the opportunity unless, God forbid, something happens to Kirk Cousins. And I don't get it. Atlanta, and no team, think about it. No team, I can't even remember. I guess I can't say no. I got to go back and look at it historically. Has there ever been an NFL team that drafted a quarterback 8th or higher as a backup after signing a quarterback for a gazillion dollars? Okay, not a gazillion, but you know what I mean. I don't get it. Like, based on this philosophy, the Jets should have drafted J.J. McCarthy. Oh, well, the Jets may not be this high in the draft in a long time. We've got Aaron Rodgers for the next few years. So let's take J.J. McCarthy because then we're good after Rodgers retires. No, the Jets are going to go out and get guys who are going to help them win now. That's what Atlanta should have done. And they didn't.
Yep.
And they didn't. So whatever. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand it. You can make the case for, oh, well, we're good at quarterback for the next 3. Are you? Is Michael Penix guaranteed to be a really good quarterback in the NFL? No, he's not. He's not. It was a stupid move by Atlanta, and it was a crappy move from a fantasy perspective.
Preach. Okay, so let's do. We're gonna have tons of time to talk about all of these guys, right, for the next few months before we're doing any drafts in fantasy. So we don't need to go name by name of every single offensive player who was drafted. But at this point, there are some wide receivers, running backs, tight ends that we have not talked about yet. Give me 1 or 2 that jump out at you as guys that you are maybe even a little bit more excited about based on their landing spot?
Well, the guy I'm most excited about is Harrison, but that's low hanging fruit.
Yeah, not him.
I
Guy we haven't talked about yet. Who's someone else? Anyone?
Xavier Worthy.
Okay.
Speed, Mahomes, Rashee Rice maybe going to get suspended for the start of the year.
There's that.
I mean, that dude's lightning fast. And if he gets behind the defense, Mahomes is going to hit him. So probably Xavier Worthy. In terms of somebody we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, in a redraft, Xavier Worthy going to go ahead of Odunze?
Yeah. I mean,
I think you will.
You think so?
He's got a shot to be. I mean, and now the Chiefs all of a sudden have some depth at wide receiver, which we can't say about that for the last few years. They've won, Super Bowls.
Yeah.
But so but Kelsey's not getting any younger.
Yeah. No.
They could lose Rice for any number of games if he gets suspended for that stupid incident that he got himself caught up in. Hollywood Brown's a good player. So you can argue that Worthy maybe is the fourth best option in Kansas City as a receiver. You can make that argument, but I wouldn't be surprised in some redrafts if he went ahead of Odunze because of Mahomes, just simply because of Mahomes in the offense.
For sure. Mahomes gets the Mahomes boost, and he's a much more attractive fantasy candidate than he would be on any other team just because he went to the Chiefs and Andy Reid, not just Mahomes, but Andy Reid also. Yeah. I do think, though, in terms of the Rome Odunze, now that I've had 5 seconds to think about it, I think I would still take Rome because I think Rome is a better wide receiver all around, and they're in similar situations in terms of I don't know that the 1 and 2 in Kansas City are better than the 1 and 2 that Odunze is competing for targets against in Chicago, but there are people there, right? Hollywood is going to get targets. Rashee, assuming he's on the field, is going to get targets. Kelsey's certainly going to get targets. So I don't really necessarily think there's an argument to be made for Xavier Worthy.
So you like Worthy more? Do you like Worthy more in a redraft or a best ball? Because in best ball, he's going to pop some weeks for sure.
You think so? I think I like him. No, he's not somebody who really jumps out at me in best ball either, because I think they're going to spread the ball around in Kansas City. I don't think it's going to be oh my gosh, this is a him week. I don't necessarily see that in the cards. In Dynasty, I think he's more appealing in Dynasty now that he's paired at a very young age with Mahomes, and he's going to grow with him, and who knows what's going to happen with Rashee and Hollywood, is older, and Kelsey's certainly older, and the offense can change. So if it works out, I think that's good.
Yeah. Some other guys that I'm going to have my eye on, certainly Roman Wilson in Pittsburgh, because do you pencil him in as the 2 behind Pickens? I mean, maybe. Right. I mean, it's possible. I'll have my eye on him. Xavier Leggett, I'll have my eye on him. Although, he doesn't have a clear path to targets because he's got Deontay and Adam Thielen there, but I want to see how they utilize him. I'd say Ricky Pearsall if the Niners make a move, but it looks like they're not. So he's going to end up. Go ahead.
Talk about best ball. Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall is one of those guys in those later rounds. I think he's going to be super exciting in a best ball format in particular, because that is an offense where people spike and then go away and then spike and then go away. It's so game plan specific. And I think Ricky Pearsall is I love the pick for San Francisco. I think it's perfect. They must be salivating at all the ways they can use him, because he's so, he lined up everywhere at Florida, mostly in the slot though, but everywhere. They even had him coming out of the backfield. Again, this has San Francisco written all over it. He's a precise route runner. I think that's a really, really interesting pick.
And then honestly, the 2 other guys that we haven't talked about yet, Trey Benson, James Conner always gets hurt, always. So Benson's going to be one of the best handcuffs in fantasy football. And I would not be surprised if he got his share of starts because Conner went down. And if he's good, maybe we're looking at a committee there. Conner's value gets hurt. And then Blake Corum, I want to get your take on that, because you're an all LA girl.
Yeah, love the pick. I don't know what to do with Kyron.
Kyron Williams is not durable. He was super productive last year, was a touchdown machine. Do they dial back the usage with Kyren and give Blake Corum more opportunities, which would hurt Kyren? Is Kyren still a first-round fantasy pick, Linz?
No, I don't think so. I think it's entirely possible Blake starts the season as a backup as opposed to a committee
he
back.
definitely will. Yes.
Well, I mean, they could rotate them. That's possible. They could create different roles for the two of them, and but I think it's more likely that Kyren starts the season with the same role that he had. I just think that Blake being there, you have to push. Like, I feel less comfortable pulling the trigger on Kyren late in the first, early in the second, which is where I did feel comfortable.
Agreed.
Just because I think that there's more risk for him to be usurped or find himself in a committee situation.
And that is the problem at the running back position in terms of the rookies. When you talk about, Benson's got to play behind Connor.
Right.
Brooks, we both think he'll end up being the starter at some point, but right now they still have Sanders and they have Chuba there, right?
That's my number one running back. That is in fantasy and that's the best situation, because if we had looked at all of the running back landing spots going into the draft and said, like, where's the worst room? Like, where's the one that you want upgraded? Because you're not real excited about the fantasy options here. We would have circled Carolina, would have been in the top 5 of our answers. And so I really like the fact that, running back in terms of the way running back beauty this year is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, everyone, we knew going in that all of these different teams were going to rank these different guys differently based on how they want to run their offense and what they think has value to them. Jonathan Brooks was a guy, though, who I'm sure was number one on a lot of people's boards. And the fact that he went to one of the situations that we would have isolated as being a spot where we wanted an upgrade, I think that's ideal. I like him there.
But if you look at the running back, and I said this earlier in the show, and you can go through and look, the Jets drafted 2. They got no shot to beat out Breece Hall. None.
Right.
Miami drafted Jalen Wright. He's 3rd on the depth chart. I know. If Mostert stays healthy, he's not going to do much. He'll get in the game here and there.
I think Jalen's a really interesting handcuff, because what they did there is they doubled down on, like, we fall apart at the end of the year when people start getting hurt. I think what they did there was they doubled down on Achane and Mostert. They were like, when Achane got hurt last year, we were screwed. Mm-hmm. And Achane was so good at the beginning of the year, and we think that Achane will continue to be that. We need another Achane on the bench ready to rotate in if for whatever reason he's not there, because we cannot afford for that part of our game to go away. And I think that Jalen Wright's that. So if you're looking at somebody that maybe just stash on your bench, like we were talking about Penix, I don't want Penix. I'm more interested in stashing Jalen Wright, because if something happens to one of those two guys, Jalen's upside in fantasy in that offense is like he could be your RB1 in any given week if he gets the opportunity that's given to Achane or Mostert. So I think he's very interesting, but you're right. He's going to have to wait for it. He's not a bell cow. There are no bell cows.
Same thing as Marshawn Lloyd. Like, I mean, he could be 3rd on the depth chart in Green Bay. Like, if the Cowboys drafted him, you'd be like, oh, sleeper, here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
But, now he's freaking 3rd on the depth chart, maybe, unless he beats out Dylan in Green Bay. Bucky Irving, second best on the depth chart behind Rachaad White.
This is my guy. This is my guy. Can I talk about Bucky for 2 seconds? Because this has been my guy the whole draft process. I said before the draft, I was like, if he goes to the right spot, or not a bad spot, then Bucky is a guy that I could see myself targeting in the last few rounds of every draft. This is a guy who I think has the potential to be really interesting in fantasy because of the type of running back that he is. And I get why his profile didn't lead to NFL teams tripping all over themselves to bring him in, but we see that all the time at running back. We see guys seemingly come out of nowhere, and his profile to me screams that guy that does come out of nowhere and all of a sudden is one that we're really interested in fantasy. Like, they didn't like his size. He's the exact same size as Kyren Williams, who clearly was big enough, strong enough to get it done in real football and also in fantasy. I love the landing spot for him, because we talked a lot towards the end of the season and in the offseason so far about Rachaad White and the fact that he was so good in fantasy, but my fear was he wasn't particularly good at literally running with the ball. Like, he's good in fantasy because he's a great pass catcher. He comes out of the backfield. He gives us those PPR points, and he's good at that, but he's not particularly good at just running the ball. And I think you have to have an offense that can run the ball successfully. Tampa Bay did not have that. So now they add Bucky. I think Bucky has a chance as a 4th round pick to get on the field immediately in a committee type situation to give them more of that. He's got the balance that makes him tough to bring down. He forces you to miss. That first guy's not going to bring him down. His missed tackles forced per attempt was in the 99th percentile in college. He had 1,800 yards after contact. He had the 5th highest rushing grade by PFF in his last 3 years. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Bucky Irving is my guy, and you're going to hear me say this name between now and fantasy drafts quite a bit. He's going to be one of those last few rounds if he doesn't move up a little bit, and he probably won't. But my guess is we're going to start hearing his name come training camp time, and that he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be telling you to go get in one of those last few rounds. I like him very much.
And then the last one, I mean, like, we've just been talking about the running backs all ended up in spots where they're going to have to battle for touches. I mean, Denver too. Like, Denver's got 4 running backs now. Like, so again, it wasn't a great draft for fantasy, especially at running back. Redraft, certainly. Long term, we got maybe some options. But I mean, and one other thing too, I know we gotta get kicking here, but which of the Chargers running backs do you draft? I mean, like, we all kind of like were hoping that they were going to draft, Blake Corum because of the Harbaugh connection. They did not do that. And you're looking at Dobbins and Gus Edwards, right? A couple of guys who were teammates in Baltimore. Jimmy stole them from his bro, Johnny there, brought him to Hollywood.
Well, this is an interesting conversation, I think, to push to later in the week, because now we're talking about the veterans that did not get usurped, right? Based on the draft, like that find themselves in situations
Zach
like now we kind of
Moss, baby. If you got Zach Moss in Dynasty right now, you're like doing a jig. You love it.
100%. Big fan of that. So we'll talk about the other veteran, like winners and losers, maybe a little bit later on in the week. And then I know you've talked about the fact that you're starting to take a look at your rankings. And so we'll hit you on what your rankings look like. And we'll do that a little bit later on in the week. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Believe Fantasy Football Show presented by Bet Online. We would, again, love to hear from you. Your thoughts on all the things that we said, someone that you like more or less than us in fantasy and redraft or in dynasty, these rookies. Give us your thoughts on the veterans that you think their fantasy value either went up or down based on the draft results ahead of us having that conversation later on in the week. You can hit up Fabs at Michael_Fabiano on Twitter. I am Lindsay_Rhodes, or you can leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, wherever you are listening to this, Spotify, perhaps.
Also, your comments on Lindsay's hat too, by the way.
It's so crooked. It's driving me nuts. I'm sorry about that. Anyone who's looking at me and just feels like lopsided. Also, like and subscribe. Please, please, please help us out by doing that. And we will, if you do subscribe, then the episode that's up on Thursday will be there waiting for you as soon as it's ready to go. We'll see you then.